And welcome to A Course in Miracles 365, Awakening to Love. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and I'm excited, as always, I'm excited for today's workbook lesson because we're going deep, we're getting deep into the workbook for students and some fundamental, really foundational pieces of what is a different thought system. In other words, it's a new way of being. And as we're 35 lessons into this workbook, I hope that you're finding some joy in this process. This is intended to challenge all of our assumptions about who we are, about our relationship to ourselves, about our relationship to others, and the world in general. That is one of the hallmarks of a good spiritual practice, is it challenges the status quo. Well, and why would we want that? Because the status quo doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for us because we see things backwards in the world. We think we're cut off. We think we're separate. So what we perceive to be reality is, in fact, not reality at all. And what happens as we go forward in life and have one experience after another is we begin to have glimpses that what appears to be happening is not, in fact, all that there is. In fact, it's just a fragment of all that there is. And in fact, it doesn't even play a significant role in all that there is, because as we find going forward, it is simply an illusion. Now, that is not something that occurs to us day to day when we're in the midst of our daily life, when we're in the midst of suffering, of feeling stressed out, of feeling exhausted, right? Exasperated, tired, angry, stressed, whatever those feelings are that come up. It takes some choice on our part. It takes discipline on our part to continually come back to a spiritual practice like the workbook for students, like A Course in Miracles in general. Maybe you're reading the text or the manual for teachers. Meditation, yeah, takes coming back to yoga, takes coming back to prayer in whatever form that takes for you, takes coming back to. It's not enough to do it just once, because every moment of every day, we have the opportunity to choose. We have free will, which we have never lost. We could choose not to exercise it, and that is in itself our free will in action, because we're choosing not to exercise it. So if we're in denial of all of these things, that's a choice. It's a choice, just as choosing to delve into your spirituality is also a choice. So we have that choice moment to moment, every day, every single day. And I thank you for joining me here. It's beautiful that we're all here in this community, and I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for participating and joining in. I know a number of you join almost daily, so thank you very much for that. And thank you for all the shares, the comments, and do let people know about Enlightened World Network. If you are enjoying the programming here, the network is making every effort to add all kinds of different programs. And it's a really, really beautiful place to come and have these discussions in a safe environment. So that's very important. And thank you all for all of your shares. Well, so this is a really in-depth lesson here, lesson 35. Let's delve into it. My mind is part of God's. I am very holy. Are you experiencing resistance to this? My mind is part of God's. I am very holy. I mean, you might not be. If you're not, fantastic. If you are, fantastic. That's okay. That it's okay, because these are, as I mentioned a few minutes ago at the outset, ideas that seek to turn the way we see things 180 degrees on its head. And we need that because why? Well, the way that we've been doing things is not producing constant, lasting happiness for us. Now, we may have a preponderance of happiness. You might be very materially wealthy in this lifetime. Maybe you're not. I don't know. Maybe you have fancy cars, a big, fancy, big bank account, right? Maybe you're in a beautiful, loving relationship. Everybody's external circumstance appears to differ, but internally, our mind is part of God's. And we are, each and every one of us, very holy. The ego wants to resist that. Why? Because the ego wants to claim the throne of God, so to speak, for itself. It wants to be the end all, be all, the arbiter, absolute truth. And it actually doesn't exist. So no wonder it would be confused about all this. Our minds are actually part of God's, and the very first paragraph has some really, really important statements in it that I want to go through here, because as we seek to integrate these ideas into our experience and perceive the world differently, perceive ourselves differently, these are important ideas to work with. And there's a lot here. So let's take our time here today as we go through. So the first sentence, right? Today's idea does not describe the way you see yourself now. You do not see yourself as very holy. Your mind is being part of God's. In other words, you do not see yourself as living in God, as part of God, as an extension of God and God's love. Well, God is simply love, not one who loves, but love itself. Yeah, we weren't always taught that. I was not taught that in Sunday school in the Southern Baptist Church. Yes, you may be familiar with such an organization, but as you may have heard on some of the past lives, I was that kid in Sunday school that always asked questions, the annoying type that the teachers wished would shut up. That was me. Probably, right? None of what I was being offered made deep, resonant sense to me, so I asked questions. That's what we do. Spirituality is about inquiry. It's about self-inquiry. Bottom line, right? What am I? Who am I? Those are the questions that we should be asking. Now, if we ask the ego that question, then the ego will say, well, I'm Tomas Garza. I'm 49 years old. That's how old I am. I live in the United States. I'm a man. I am a meditation instructor, and apply one label after another. Is that who we really are? No, right? I mean, who's changed careers in this life? So that label, a common label of our job, our career path, that's a label. We label ourselves in countless different ways, and the labels change, especially those labels, job and something that we do externally, job, career, especially these days with the work world being the way it is with a pandemic. Who hasn't changed their careers and their career trajectory? I mean, really, right? The ultimate reality is, in fact, changeless. Our minds are part of God's. We are very holy. This is the idea that we work with today. And it's difficult if we identify with the ego, and if the workbook says if we think we're in the world, which is what happens when we identify with the ego. We identify with this body mostly. We think we're running around with other bodies, competing for supposedly scarce resources, right? Going off to work or staying home and working, yeah, eating, having all kinds of bodily needs. Yeah, we identify with that. And if we think we're in the world, it's difficult to believe that, in fact, reality is we're part of God. In other words, not in this world of a constant round of suffering. Yeah, in Buddhism, it's known as Samsara, which is a wheel, and that's Sanskrit literally for a wheel. And it's an endless round in Buddhist philosophy of one rebirth after another, one lifetime after another, of suffering and ego identification until boom, we get it. That is completely unnecessary, and in fact is a block to the experience, knowledge, and experience of who we really are. And we've all gone round and around on that hamster wheel for a long, long, long time. And you're watching this video right now because you're near the end of your journey here. There's no way that you would be tuned in to Enlightened World Network. There's no way that you would be watching A Course in Miracles 365 if you weren't ready to go home, so to speak. And you find, in fact, we've never left. There's no place to go because we've never, in fact, left. Our minds just wandered off for a little while. Sometimes it was playtime, sometimes it wasn't. Now, are you ready? Are you ready to make the journey home? If you're watching, you are. I know you are. I am. So if we think we're in the world here, coming back to the workbook lesson, that's what we'll believe, and that's what we'll see. So if we think we're separate, we'll see separation. We'll see other people as competing with us, as separate, and even as hostile to us. That's just the way that it works. It's just the way that we see it. And if we think we're part of it, that's what we experience. Now, we could train our minds to think the opposite, that our mind is part of God's. And that is the purpose of lesson 35 in the workbook. All of these are progressive, as you'll notice if you're going through, especially for the first time. And if you're doing it for the 6th or 7th time, this is my 3rd time through the workbook in its entirety, I am literally having a vastly different and a deeper experience every time I go through it. So this is something that I think we can all look forward to, is we're uncovering more each time through. And if this is the first time and it seems like this is a difficult lesson to work with, I invite you to just stick with it and attempt all of the practice periods as suggested. Yeah, simply that. It's a beautiful thing to me, and I know that I continue to stress it, but it's very important, and there might be someone watching this live stream for the very first time. The workbook does not require us to believe anything. Spirituality is about experience. It's about experience. It's not about belief. It's not about believing one thing over another. Especially, there's no separation of any kind. It's about experience. So what we're doing, literally, as the title of this live stream suggests, we're awakening to love. We're awakening to the truth of who we really, at our core, foundationally are. So how do you practice this idea? Well, it has us search our minds. So we'll notice, if we allow ourselves to really, truly notice, that we have dozens and dozens and dozens of self-concepts. And they're highlighted here in the workbook for students in italics on today's lesson. So for example, the workbook says, as you search your mind, you might find that I see myself as imposed on. I see myself as incompetent. That could come up, right? These are examples. I see myself as anxious. I see myself as sad. I see myself as energetic. I see myself as happy. I see myself as an expert. I see myself as joyful. I see myself as accomplished. I see myself as struggling. And you might find that things that we see ourselves as, like accomplished or joyful, will alternate with depressed, struggling, incompetent, unknowing, right? Ignorant. And we label some of these bad, some of them good, and you might find that in the course of a practice period, your mind jumps all over the map. One minute we're joyful, the next minute we're sad, and vice versa. That can change. And these are very, very important distinctions here, because really they're not distinctions at all. That's the importance of this, is that you just practice with whatever comes up. So today's lesson says, all right, if you see yourself as victorious, this is one of the examples in the workbook. All right, I see myself as powerful. Let's go with that, right? But my mind is part of God's. I am very holy. Apply the day's idea to everything you see yourself as. I see myself as powerful, but my mind is part of God's. I am very holy. I see myself as sick, but my mind is part of God's. I am very holy. I see myself as helpless, but my mind is part of God's. I am very holy. I see myself as beautiful, but my mind is part of God's. I'm very holy. I see myself as incompetent, but my mind is part of God's. I am very holy. Just apply the idea to whatever comes up. These are just examples. Now, I mean, I have been through life. As I mentioned earlier, I'm 49 years old in this lifetime. So this thing that's talking to you has been around for a number called 49 things called years. What is all that anyway? Actually, I don't know. Been around a little bit, and that means that I've had, just like you, the full gamut of experience about ourselves. We think we're beautiful. We think we're ugly. We think we're wonderful. We think we suck. Back and forth, yo, 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 yo. That is samsara. That's the endless round of suffering. And spiritual practice, this self-inquiry, right? These lessons, like the workbook for students, are our way out. And yes, there is a way out. You know this to be true, or you wouldn't be here watching me live. All right, so let me tune in and thank you all. If you have questions, I hope that you've written them here in the comment thread. This is something that I check throughout the day, by the way. So if you're just joining me for the first time, this is something that I do. I'll answer as many questions or address as many comments as I can here in the time that remains. And this live stream is always very short. It's usually only on about 20 minutes here. So Deidre, hello, how are you? And Robert, hi, guys, thank you for tuning in. Good evening. Yes, it's really, really wonderful. It is a beautiful thing, finding new and different ways to be. Yeah, I like this. Okay, thank you. Yeah, new and different ways to be in the human experiment. Yeah, I like this, because we can choose, right? That's one of the things that just keeps coming back to me. It keeps coming back to me as so, so important. The fact that we have never lost our own free will. We have, at all times, the power to choose. We can choose love or we can choose fear. That's the choice that we can make. Now, it can take so many millions of external permutations, right? We have different adjectives for things, like I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel depressed, I feel great. I don't feel great, I feel energized, I feel perfect, I feel wonderful. Now, you name it, we've got many different ways of expressing either love or fear, but moment to moment, we have a choice on how we can be. And how does that translate into the world? Well, this is really critically important, isn't it? We have a choice as to how we show up in the world. Do we show up as love or do we show up as fear? Super, super important. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love this comment. So, yes, thank you. Thank you. So, in conclusion, today, I want to thank you all for tuning in. And this is, I hope, somewhat fun for you, because underlying all of the challenges that come up when our ego is threatened, and they're numerous, aren't they? That our ego doesn't want us to do these exercises. It doesn't want you to meditate. It doesn't want you to pray. It does not want you to engage in spiritual practice. Why? Because it rightly fears its own cancellation. Yeah, correctly. And A Course in Miracles says this. The more that we work on showing up as love, the less we will identify with the ego, because we'll begin to see, we'll begin to experience what the Course labels vision, which is not of the body's eyes, but it's internal. And we'll begin to have the experience of not being separate from our fellow human beings, right? From God. We're not separate. There is no separation of any kind, period, end of discussion, mic drop. Right? There is no separation. So if you take nothing else out of a year-long study of this workbook, definitely take that one to heart. There is no separation of any kind. And in the world, yeah, it appears this way, but as today's lesson shows us, our mind is part of God's. We are all, each and every one of us, very holy. So thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow on A Course in Miracles 365. Everyone have a great day.